For literally thousands of years, an incredibly deep relationship has existed between the First Peoples of Canada and the land they call home. And we're not just talking about geography here. This is a connection that shapes everything: culture, law, and identity itself. So today, we're going to dive into that enduring bond.
And that connection is just as vital today as it has ever been. This quote, wow, it really gets to the heart of it. It tells us that for Indigenous peoples, the health of the land and the health of the people are basically one and the same. It's this living, breathing relationship that is absolutely central to well-being.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with that foundational connection to the land itself. Then we'll see how that relationship just blossoms into culture and law. And finally, we'll look at why understanding all this is so crucial for the modern process of reconciliation. Let's get into it. Okay, first up, the land. Simple as that. Everything, and I mean everything, starts here. It's the source of life, spirituality, and identity. You'll often hear the term Turtle Island when people talk about North America. And it's so much more than just a different name on a map. It actually reflects a whole worldview where the land, creation stories, and culture are all deeply woven together, long before any colonial borders were ever drawn. Now, this is what I find so fascinating. The environment didn't just influence culture, it directly shaped it. Just think about it for a second. If your entire life revolved around the salmon runs on the Pacific coast, your traditions and your language would be completely different from a culture that was centered on hunting bison out on the plains. Your identity literally grew right out of the soil, the rivers, and the forests around you.
And the bison is the perfect example of this. For so many peoples of the plains, the bison was, well, everything. It wasn't just a source of food. Every single part of the animal was used for shelter, clothing, tools, you name it. The bison was seen as a sacred relative, the ultimate provider of life.
Okay, get ready for this number because it is just staggering. Back in the 1800s, there were an estimated 30 to 60 million bison on Turtle Island. But then, during what's known as the Great Slaughter, driven by colonial expansion, that number plummeted to fewer than 1,000. Just let that sink in. This wasn't just an ecological catastrophe, it was a devastating, intentional blow to the cultures that saw the bison as the very heart of their world. So from that profound connection to the land, this incredibly rich cultural fabric emerged. Let's take a look at some of the language, stories, and heritage that sprang right from it. You might actually be surprised by how many things that feel quintessentially Canadian come directly from Indigenous innovations and languages. The canoe, snowshoes, maple syrup. These aren't just objects, they're brilliant technologies born from a deep, intimate understanding of the land. And get this, even the name of the country, Canada, comes from the Iroquoian word for village. How cool is that? But culture is so much more than just things, right? For Indigenous peoples, storytelling is the primary way knowledge has been passed down for generations. And these aren't just bedtime stories. They are highly sophisticated educational tools. They teach history, morality, science, and the basic principles of how to live in a good way with your community and the world around you. A really fantastic example of this is a figure you see in many stories, the trickster. He's not your typical perfect hero. In fact, he's often greedy or foolish or makes huge mistakes. But that's the point. It's through his blunders that we learn these profound truths about ourselves and the right way to live. It's such a clever and very human way to teach the complexities of life. And those life lessons taught in the stories are often collected into these powerful ethical frameworks. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples follow what are known as the 7 Sacred Teachings, a beautiful guide for how to live a good life. What's so amazing here is how these values, love, respect, courage, honesty, wisdom, humility, and truth, are tied directly back to the natural world. Each teaching is represented by an animal. For example, the bear represents courage because of its strength and how fiercely it protects its cubs. So you see, nature itself provides the blueprint for how to be a good human being. Okay, so we've talked about personal values. Now let's zoom out and look at the societal structures. How did these principles shape laws, governance, and the agreements for how to live together on the land? This is such a great, concrete example of customary law. The laws of the hunt weren't just friendly suggestions. They were a formal system designed to make sure the entire community thrived. They promoted fairness, order, and a deep respect for the buffalo. It just goes to show you there were already sophisticated systems of governance in place. Now, when we talk about agreements with the Crown, it is absolutely critical to understand that there are 2 very different types. On one hand, you have the historic numbered treaties, mostly with First Nations. These were often negotiated under extremely unequal conditions, with both sides sometimes having totally different ideas of what was being agreed to. On the other hand, you have modern treaties. These are comprehensive land claim agreements, especially with Inuit in the north, where historic treaties were never signed. These are modern, constitutionally protected agreements that clearly lay out rights and self-governance. And this map right here shows you the result of those modern agreements. This huge territory is Inuit Nunagat, and the name itself is so powerful. In Inuktitut, it means land, water, and ice, showing that all three are essential to Inuit culture and life. It's a perfect modern expression of that ancient, holistic connection to the land. And that brings us right up to today. How do we take all of this history, this deep cultural connection, and apply it to the present-day movement towards reconciliation? I'm sure you've heard a land acknowledgement before an event or a meeting, right? Well, this growing practice is directly tied to everything we've just been talking about. So what's it really for? Well, first, we have to know what we mean by reconciliation. And it's not a single event, it's an ongoing process. It's really about correcting the history books and the stories that have so often ignored or erased Indigenous presence and contributions, and then using that shared truth to build new, respectful relationships. So, a land acknowledgement is one small step in that big process. The whole point is to make the invisible visible. It's a formal statement that says, we recognize and respect the Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land since the beginning of time, and we honor their unbreakable relationship to it. But here's the most important part. It's meant to be more than just words. It's supposed to be a call to action. It's a reminder for all of us of our collective responsibility to recognize Indigenous rights, to uphold the true spirit of the treaties, both old and new, and to commit to the ongoing work of justice. Ultimately, the path forward really is through understanding. This logo for Education for Reconciliation just captures that spirit perfectly. Learning this history, understanding these different worldviews, that is the real work that helps move us all forward together. And so we'll end with a question for you to think about. Knowing what we know now, that this profound, sacred, and enduring connection exists between Indigenous peoples and the land, how can we, each of us, in our own lives and communities, participate in honoring that relationship? It's a pretty important question,